major parks are set to benefit from a massive transformation as part of the Three Parks Initiative being undertaken by the Government of Guyana and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. I am Ernestine Leonard, and this week on Dorado Shines, we will be taking a closer look at what this plan entails and how it promises to transform the zoological park, the national park and the botanical gardens into modern recreational facilities. These parks form the core components of Guyana's network of green spaces. They are heavily utilized by residents of the city and surrounding areas. The overall objectives of the Three Parks Initiative are to enhance and rehabilitate key facilities and infrastructure in each of these green spaces, thereby improving the quality of services provided to the public.
The Three Parks Initiative was the brainchild of Minister Robert Prasad, and it basically aims to rehabilitate three of the biggest parks in Georgetown, which are the zoo, the national park and the botanic gardens. The thinking behind it was really as Georgetown expands and becomes more of a city of concrete and asphalt, green spaces like these parks become really more important for recreation and as an escape for a lot of the urban population. The primary focus of our initiative really looks at security, issues of flooding and drainage, as well as developing new facilities for the public and restoring old ones that really served the public well in the past and maybe have been missing from the green landscape of Georgetown.
Work has already begun to upgrade the facilities, particularly in the National Park, as part of the broader modernization and transformation plan.
A lot of the work we've started already has been in the National Park itself. One of the biggest initiatives we've completed is the introduction of lights around the full jogging track in the park. These lights are turned on up to 8 o'clock now, and it facilitates people to come into the park and exercise when it maybe the day isn't as hot. We've also started to excavate drains, address some of our flooding issues, and we're in the midst of a big effort to raise the athletics track, which is one of our largest fields in the park. The challenge we have with drainage is that as Georgetown has developed and it has a lot of properties and roads have been raised, places like the park, the gardens and the zoo have kind of remained at the level that they've always been. What has happened as a result is a lot of Georgetown first drains into the park and these other places, and only when the city itself drains does the park drain. Having a park that's underwater for 3 months a year is really defeating the purpose of a park. So what we would like to do is eventually raise the entire park to address the flooding. In the meantime, we're taking one field at a time.
Efforts are also being made to have corporate Guyana come on board in support of the modernization plan.
Appealing to private persons and corporations and even construction companies that may have fill, whether it be mud or sand or some low-grade builder's waste, to assist us in being able to fill in some of the lower parts of the park and elevate them. You'll see the sand being stockpiled for the athletics track. A lot of that sand is really going to be used to provide a layer beneath the soil that will help in the storage of water as well as better runoff and to raise the whole field. That sand you see there is just half of what we hope to accumulate before we start working. But we're still in the process of inviting other persons that may have additional material, additional fill to join us in this effort. So that when we're finished raising this field, it can serve its purpose in the long term. We wouldn't have to worry about having to deal with the park maybe in another 10 to 15 years.
The Protected Areas Commission is continuously working to engage interested businesses, individuals, and other groups to support rehabilitation efforts. The Commission is even open to sponsors using their own contractors and issuing payments directly to these contractors based on agreed designs and specifications. Using this approach, sponsors donate completed, state-of-the-art enclosures rather than funds.
Recognize that people may want to see what we're doing before they decide whether we're serious or not, and I understand that. And in order to make it easy for people to contribute, if it's resources that they have, we're even willing to sit down and discuss ways where people can hire their own contractors and pay them directly. So they don't need to give us any money. They don't need to pass money through the commission. All we need to agree on is the design of whatever project they're interested in. And all we do is ensure that the design is implemented as per agreement and at a certain level of quality and standards that would ensure that it's lasting long term. So don't be apprehensive about joining us. I think it's worth the effort and it's worth the time, and I think it's an important moment in history that will allow us to basically transform the landscape of Georgetown and make it a better place for our children and our grandchildren.
In addition to the broader modernization plan, the Three Parks initiative has three main areas in which much emphasis will be placed.
We're looking in the case of the botanical gardens, and you'll see this in the images we've developed, to do things like water fountains, elevated walkways, allowing people to access the gardens in all weather situations, as well as creating features like garden islands that assist both with drainage as well as security, where the water acts as a barrier for the development of the infrastructure we'd want to put on the garden island, as well as the plants that we could plant there. The zoo, we've done a lot of work in the planning of what we'd like to do with the zoo. I usually use the analogy of trying to put together a puzzle without the puzzle box. For a number of years, that's what we've been doing. But that's what we've been trying to do with a lot of these areas, where we just work on a piece of it. We don't have the vision of what we would like the end product to be. So as we worked in pieces, some pieces didn't fit, and it wasn't really working towards a cohesive image. So that is really true in the zoo. And what we would like to do, and what we have done, is develop a master plan that gives us that vision, the cover of the box, the puzzle box in essence, so that when we start to put these pieces in place, we know what the end image looks like, and we know how each piece fits together. So even if it takes us 20 years, we're doing it from a strategic point of view, and we're making interventions that will last and will fit together for a longer, much more comprehensive vision of what the zoo should be. Much of the focus for Three Parks so far has been the national park, because it has one of the highest levels of use out of the three parks. And in order to increase security of the national park and extend hours of usage, one of the first things we did was we installed complete lighting around the full jogging track. A lot of people coming into the park now don't even recognize that the lights are there. They kind of assume that they've been there all the time, but the lights were only put in earlier this year. Focusing still on security, one of the things we did was putting guard huts around the jogging trail. Drainage issues in the park will only be solved when we raise the park. So what we've been doing is we've been targeting one field in particular, one of the largest fields in the park, which is the athletics track and the inner field. And we're currently stockpiling materials, over 7,000 cubic meters of material to raise the entire area. It wouldn't prevent flooding completely, but it will significantly reduce it. And until we were able to do that for the entire park, the little mud that we have, we've been trying to find innovative ways of using it. So rather than spreading out the little mud over a large field and not really raising it much, we're putting it into what we see as maybe a more effective use. The idea was to, again, use the little mud that we have and develop a nature trail into the center of the park, which would pull people off of this jogging trail and allow them to experience a different side of the park. We plan to also re-establish the bridges that used to be there in these three locations, using a motif similar to the Kissing Bridge in the Botanical Gardens. And then using the same concept of the existing mound, we plan to raise little hills on the edges of the waterways. And that would give persons visiting the park a rare opportunity to climb a hill in the middle of Georgetown, which is, as we know, is a really flat area. In this area of the trail, the new trail we'd like to establish, we would restore the floral clock that some of the more senior visitors to the park may remember. The idea we have is that for each hour, whether we 1, 2, 3 o'clock, we will get a stone or a boulder from each region. So region 1 would be set at 1 o'clock, region 2, 2 o'clock, and so forth. 11 o'clock would probably be represented by a piece of driftwood from the ocean, and 12 could be, for instance, a stamped concrete coat of arms. And the idea here is that you make a clock, kind of a national clock, that's made up of parts of Guyana.
In addition to improving the infrastructure of these facilities, building the human resource capacity is also of major importance.
Aside from addressing the infrastructural needs of the zoo, because a lot of the zoo was built in the 50s, we recognize the need to build capacity as well. Because there's no sense having a state-of-the-art cage if you don't have the expertise, the local expertise, to be able to care for the animals and to be able to communicate effective messages through the zoo. So with support from the Mexican government through the Mexican embassy here, and with the support of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, we were able to bring in the Deputy Director of the largest zoo in Mexico. He's going to be with us for another week, from the 11th to the 15th. And as he's here, he'll be working with our personnel at the zoo, both at the management and at the keeper level, to build their capacity to address a lot of the challenges they're facing, to advise our veterinary staff on how to deal with certain conditions. And hopefully at the end, this is just the beginning, hopefully at the end we'll be able to provide a much more comprehensive program, not just for our visitors but for our animals, and to be able to better address their health and their dietary needs. in the long term, that the relationship that starts now could potentially move into other areas like animal exchanges, um, having folks from Guyana go to Mexico, be trained there, and just to establish that line of communication. So as we develop the zoo and we put in new exhibits, we'll always have that opportunity to link into the people with the experience and the people who've been doing it for a number of years, to assist us from a technical standpoint. There's a lot of work to be done at the zoo, and even though we may not be able to hire as much people as we like, um, what we can do is to engage with volunteers. There was quite an active volunteer program there a couple of years ago, and our intention is to restart that program, bring in young people, bring in volunteers, bring in whoever has the time and is willing to assist us. Train them in education, delivery of information, and use them to kind of raise the zoo, both with the efforts of our personnel as well as these volunteers. For instance, there are cages in the zoo which were designed to be walk-through cages, but are now locked 100% of the time because there's no one to supervise people as they move through. Now, if we were able to have people go into the exhibit and then speak to them about what they're looking at and communicate the information and the messages about conservation of these animals and the need for things like the low carbon development strategy and other conservation mechanisms. If we were able to do that, the zoo would be much more than just coming and looking at animals through a mesh.
The ministry, in collaboration with the Seattle-based PJA Architects, which specializes in zoo design, has already developed an initial zoning plan for the transformation of the zoo. The zoning plan will form the basis for the long-term master plan to ensure that this rehabilitation effort is informed by international best practices in zoo husbandry and sustainable in the long run. The plan will benefit from public consultations and will provide a framework to address many of the zoo's challenges.
We are now making an assessment on the master plan that the Guyana Zoo have developed recently, and we find a lot of opportunities that with our experience, our Mexican experience, our zoo. I work for a Chapultepec Zoo in Mexico, and it has more than 90 years. Next year we are 90 years of funding. So we have a little bit of experience, and we are here in order to share that experience with the Guyana Zoo. I think Guyana Zoo have a lot of potential. These grounds are meant to hold animals. I mean, you're in the tropic. We are in the Nearctic region, which is so much colder. So we have a lot of problems with the animals over there. I think you are going to be able to use this natural and beautiful environment you have in Guyana in order to develop a good zoo. The master plan is incredibly well developed, and it will have some emphasis in its first phases to help Guyana's animals, people from Guyana, and in other stages they will develop an international zoo. But at the beginning there will be a plus holding these beautiful harpy eagles, these beautiful anacondas, these beautiful macaws, and I'm pretty sure that the whole world will know more Guyana's biodiversity. You have a great zoo educator. You have a very good facility, a very huge facility. If you compare the facilities you here the Guyana Zoo have in order to make the education to the children, if you compare that building to other zoos in the world, you have a huge department of education. I think one of the first steps that Guyana Zoo could make is they already make those steps. It's to develop a master plan in order to rebuild this zoo, to make it into alive again. I mean, this is a live zoo, and you may see there are many details, very tiny details, that now the Natural Park Commission is taking care of, and now they are remodeling the entrance. You may see a lot of bricks here because they are starting. A revolution for this zoo have started. I think once this revolution takes place, it's going to be very easy, and the people and the children will come easily.
Visiting the zoological park, the safety measures that you should definitely pay attention to for the animals in terms of animal protection is do not feed the animals. If somebody feeds the animals, what will happen is that the animal would get sick, sometimes diarrhea, and if the condition is worse enough, the animals could eventually die. So as much as possible, we try to discourage feeding of the animals, things like snacks, cheese stick, basic corn curl, or potato chips. That's not allowed. We try to prevent people from putting their hands in cages for their protection and also the animals, because we had an incident whereby somebody with eyes was picked by a Jabiru store. As well as for the animal safety, somebody bored one of the eyes of the terrorist. The terror only has one eye now because of some disgruntled student who was trying to see it do something. As well as no littering. We don't encourage littering on the zoological grounds or even in the animal cages, because what we find is that some people, they would try to put their plastic bottles, spell the animals with the plastic bottles for them to move, and what could happen is that the animal could consume the plastic bottles and then they may choke and then die. The other thing that we also consider is that try to encourage people not to do is not to tease the animals. In the height of wanting a response for from the animals, you would see people hitting the cages, hitting the barriers. So that's not allowed, and as well as going beyond the barriers to get a closer view of the animal. Especially the cats, the jaguar, the pumas, and the ocelots. That's dangerous because they're wild animals at the end of the day, and they may scratch or bite someone.
In the gardens, we've uncovered a few historic features that we kind of forgot were there. One was this effort to create a fountain. We felt that this was a good concept, and we wanted to build on it and take it from what it is now to something looking like this, and pair that with elevated all-weather walkways, so even in bad rainy weather or after a couple of days of rain, you would still be able to access the site and enjoy the fountain. Other parts of the front of the gardens face a lot of issues like flooding and security, where you may put down a few plants, nice plants, and then some overly enthusiastic visitors to the gardens may adopt them and take them home. So to address both of those issues of flooding and security, the idea was to, along the pathway to the fountain, take an area that's already elevated slightly and convert it into an island. And on that island, we would be able to plant and put in features that we would not necessarily be able to in its current state. We also looking to put in a petting zoo. The reasoning behind this is that for every 3 visitors to the zoo, 2 are children. And we really wanted to change the zoo from a space where you just come to see things to a space where you experience and learn and leave more educated than you came. And part of that emphasis, of course, has to be on the children. So in this facility, what we plan to do is have domesticated animals that are much easier to interact with. And we'd work with animal rights groups to help run the facility and to communicate the message about the need to treat animals humanely and hopefully develop a generation of guidees with empathy towards animals and an awareness on the need to conserve Guyana's wildlife. Other ideas for the zoo would be, for instance, in the monkey exhibit, to take the monkeys out from behind those bars and put them in outdoor enclosures that allow them to move around in the trees, and then take the solid concrete structure at the center and convert it to a rainforest exhibit, where we can exhibit things like tarantulas, scorpions, piranhas, small snakes, even ants. Have an ant nest in cross section. And each of these exhibits would be really cheap to manage and have very minimal resource needs, because, for instance, to maintain a tarantula, the feeding needs of that, something like that, and the cleaning needs for something that small is minimal. But the experience that it provides and the opportunity for education is really significant.
Do join us again next week for another program of El Dorado Shines. Until then, I am Ernestine Leonard, encouraging you to let's all play a role in protecting our environment.